My daughter asked me if I had seen the dog bowl. I said, no, I didn't even know he could. Today, I'm going to recap a 2020 action thriller film called The Stronghold. In the French city of Marseille, a policeman named Greg is arrested for his actions. The film then flashbacks to 8 months ago, when Greg and his two friends, Antoine and Yassine, chased a motorbike rider without license plates, a helmet, or anything else that looked suspicious because the man entered the container area. And they immediately got out of the car and immediately ran to catch up. But unfortunately, the man fled with his friend using another motorbike. Evidently, it was a stolen motorbike, and Antoine then called his informant and got information on illegal drug distribution nearby. At that time, Antoine and Yassine headed to the location while continuing to communicate with Greg, who was ready to help so they could enter. They also reasoned that they wanted to buy goods, and when they arrived, the drug dealer was immediately put in the car, and they immediately fled from the gangsters. After the arrest, Antoine gave some marijuana to his informant, named Amel, as a reward for providing information. The next day, at the police station, Greg reported to his boss, named Jerome, about his arrest yesterday. But Jerome wanted Greg to be able to catch high-class cartels, not petty drug dealers like that, and moreover, the damage costs were enormous. Greg and his friends finally continued to look for information on drug cartels from a cigarette seller who was also their informant. Because he didn't have any information, and searching for information at the market also didn't get results, rather than no one being arrested, they planned to arrest 2 illegal turtle sellers, which are protected animal species. Because they tried to avoid them, the sellers were slapped and would be taken to the police station. But suddenly, there was a report on the radio that there had been a car theft, and obviously because that would be a good catch, the 2 turtle sellers were released, and they focused on chasing the car thief. It turned out that the stolen car was taken to an area that was heavily guarded by gangsters, with its leader named Tmax. Tmax said that if there were no stolen cars that entered here, and gave 2 choices. Go from there for the safety of the police or check inside, but don't guarantee the safety of the police. And the fight began, and Greg, Antoine, and Yassine eventually backed off for a while because they were outnumbered. After that, they gathered at Yassine's house with Yassine's wife, Nora, who also worked for the police and was pregnant, but suddenly, Nora's waters broke and Yassine took her to the hospital. After the birth process was complete, the 3 of them had fun to celebrating Yassine, who had become a father. The next day, Jerome shows Greg the video, in which a mugger is being tortured for stealing drugs from customers in a drug area. Jerome then says that the guys are connected to a large drug cartel network and offers the case to Greg, who, after some thought, finally accepts the high-risk job. To get detailed drug cartel information, Antoine then came to see Amel again, and Amel explained that the place was terrible, that the drug bosses guarded it tightly and would kill anyone if anyone tried to interfere. Even if there were drug dealers who kept drugs for themselves, they would be instantly killed. We could say it has the craziest crime rate, has no rules, and doesn't care about the law or the police. Therefore, Amel asked for 5 kilos of cannabis if Antoine wanted to get detailed information about the place. Amel's request was reported to Jerome because it was impossible for them to take the confiscated police-traceable marijuana, and they had to collect it from small dealers or from customers. Jerome reminded them to be careful because if there was a mistake, their career could be over. But if successful, their salary will be increased. Morning, afternoon, and evening, Greg, Antoine, and Yassine started looking for random people who would buy cannabis and immediately scold them. Little by little, the cannabis began to collect until one night they were visited by the dealers in the area, who know that their customers' drugs are always taken. They pointed guns at each other, but in the end, the dealer backed down because he recognized Greg's face, who was a policeman. Yassine, who was the most emotional, was worried that this plan would endanger their lives because the traffickers could have just shot them. Luckily, he was calmed down and the 3 of them returned home. The next day, Amel called Antoine to meet, and she cursed because the police could usually steal goods from customers, who reportedly had spread to Amel's environment. Amel was worried that she would get involved because of the actions of Antoine and his friends, but Antoine convinced her that if she would remain safe and her identity would not be known. Then when the three of them were relaxing, headquarters reported that there was another team that needed priority assistance in the area. Greg and his friends, who used to smoke marijuana, fled because the team was being attacked. Hearing this, Greg, who didn't want to cause any more trouble there, decided not to come to help. It was clear that when he arrived at the office, a policeman named Jacques, who had been attacked by a group of drug dealers earlier, was angry with Greg because he didn't come to help. Greg, who heard that, was also angry and immediately calmed Jacques in a fairly rough way. Because it's been 3 weeks, but the cannabis that has accumulated is still 2 kilos, Greg and his team, who are also assisted by Jacques' team, will not scold in the same way as before, but are instead ordered by Jerome to immediately ambush and check their pockets to shorten the time. After 5 kilos of cannabis had been collected and would be given to Amel after the mission was completed, as promised, she gave information that in 3 days there would be a large shipment going to the drug cartel storage headquarters in an apartment, which was also attended by network bosses. Even though Amel does not know the exact storage point, Antoine was asked to follow the dealer carrying the bag so he could find the location. When the delivery day arrived, they saw a yellow car that entered the apartment area, which was very suspicious, then stopped and made a transaction with a dealer carrying a bag dressed all in black. Greg then immediately gave instructions that all teams should not be careless because they must follow where the bag is going, so that the location of a hiding and storage can be found. Now it's Antoine's turn to pretend to be a buyer, while the others are approaching the location from various directions. Unfortunately, one of the members realized that Antoine was a policeman. He shouted a code, and the dealer immediately ran away from there. Unfortunately, the dealer in black threw his bag at the man in blue and Antoine, and also the police were confronted by a group of cartel members. On the other hand, Yass, who was watching from above, saw the man in blue and immediately chased him, who fled to apartment block K16, then entered a room on the 5th floor, because many other cartel members had gone up to the top floor. Yass then hid in one of the residents' apartments. The mother and child who lived there were asked to remain silent, and Yass reported the location of the apartment on the 5th floor, which was possibly a storage of the illegal drugs. Meanwhile, Greg, Antoine, and the other police were still fighting with cartel members outside the building, and because the door was blocked, Greg and Antoine entered the apartment next door, then broke through the rooftop of the building. Just as they were about to get to Yass's place, the boy stabbed him. And immediately, Yass beat the boy until he fainted. The three of them finally broke into an apartment that was suspected of being a place to store illegal drugs and found lots of holes there. It turned out that the holes were translucent and connected to many rooms. Very carefully, they sneaked in and saw a group of cartels moving money and illegal drugs. Shortly thereafter, Greg immediately threw a smoke bomb that disrupted their vision and breathing. On the other hand, another police team succeeded in breaking down barriers and helping to arrest all the cartel members. Chases and shootings between each other could not be avoided, which resulted in all the money and the Durgas being obtained, and several cartel leaders have also been arrested. The police pointed their guns at the cartel members, who surrounded them so they could escape from there. Their car was destroyed, and a cartel member was shot with an AK-47. Fortunately, they were all able to escape and return to the office. The big risky mission succeeded, and several cartel members were arrested, and Jerome gave a very good appreciation to the entire team on duty, especially Yass, who dared to enter the enemy base alone. After the party celebration was over, Antoine gave 5 kilos of marijuana to Amel in return, and the two said goodbye as they may never see each other again. 2 months after that, Greg, Antoine, and Yass were visited by the police and detectives. Detective Yvon, as the person in charge, said that they were charged with extortion and that they arranged the cannabis trade. From police investigations, the police found out that they had stolen a lot of cannabis from customers and were suspected of having sold it. Absolutely, they explained that the cannabis was deliberately collected to pay informants in order to find out where the drugs were kept. It was clear they couldn't tell Amel's identity, and Greg was even more angry because Detective Yvon caught a fellow police officer, even though this method was common and keeping the informant's identity secret was a police code of conduct. Greg also wants to meet Jerome and the investigating judge because, according to Greg, Detective Yvon is only looking for cases that don't really exist, and also to climb his career ladder and meet the prison quota target. After that, Greg was allowed to meet with the investigating judge and Jerome, but unexpectedly, Jerome casually said that he did not know about the collection of cannabis by the three of them, and also did not know the purpose, even though it was very clear that the mission was Jerome's order. Knowing that, Greg could only remain silent because Jerome had betrayed him so he wouldn't get involved in the case. Finally, the three of them will be jailed for a while, until the results of the investigation are complete. All the prisoners yelling at them as corrupt police, as well as the news that spread, had tarnished the name of the police because they had extorted and also sold marijuana. The accusations with these nonsensical reasons made Greg, Antoine, and Yassine unable to do anything and stressed and angry because they know how the law works in their country, even though if they followed the existing procedures too closely, the drug cartel network would not be caught. Their lawyer also couldn't do anything, unless Antoine wanted to reveal the name of the informant, so there was a possibility they could be released. But as a policeman and a man of very strong principles, Antoine still didn't say anything about Amel. Even Greg, who was getting increasingly irritated by the situation, attacked one of the wardens. On the other hand, Yassine took the time to call Nora to ask about her and their baby. Jacques and his team, who were concerned about Nora's condition, came to collect money to meet Nora's needs, but Nora refused and only asked them to be witnesses that the collection of cannabis was to pay the informant and Jerome was the one who ordered it, but they could not agree. Because he did not want to be jailed, especially according to Jacques, Jerome deliberately did not admit what he had done in order to save the Northern Police Unit, including the minister who was concerned. Even though Jacques and other friends wanted to be witnesses, that would not change the police who deliberately covered up the case. Or, in other words, Greg, Antoine, and Yassine were deliberately sacrificed to satisfy many parties. After that, Nora visited Yassine in prison to tell her that if Jacques and the others couldn't help, Yassine and Nora had promised not to leave each other, even if they would be imprisoned for many years. Shortly, for their own lives and because Greg's behavior was getting crazier, Antoine was forced to tell Detective Yvon that Amel was their informant. After knowing the fact that Amel was an informant, the judge dismissed the cannabis trade charges against the three of them. Now that Yassine has joined the police union to defend his friends against the management, Greg has been fired from the police and now works as a security guard, and Antoine has been found to have a lot of marijuana at home. They are still being prosecuted for violating the Civil Code of Ethics and must fulfill the conditions for release by becoming a prison nurse. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.